Hi, I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society. Did you know that Australian wildfire facts are being blocked by the International Fact-Checking Network? Yes, the Australian wildfire facts are being blocked from public distribution by the International Fact-Check Network of Poynter Institute and Facebook. Friends of Science Society has issued a rebuttal to the Climate Feedback Australian Wildfire Analysis. Climate Feedback is a member of the IFCN that claims human-caused climate change is the culprit behind Australian wildfire stories, not arsonists or untenable fuel load. In turn, relying on Climate Feedback's authority, Facebook has been demoting page quality of those who post Australian wildfire stories that don't fit the climate catastrophe narrative. Friends of Science wildfire expert says fuel rules in case of wildfires, not temperature. Facebook and Poynter Institute have partnered in a journalism integrity project intended to prevent the spread of false news, but instead they're promoting a singular climate dogma narrative. Most mainstream media outlets toe the line on the pronouncements of Poynter's IFCN climate feedback without question. Friends of Science Society argues that this is contrary to the principles of freedom of the press, and it's damaging to the safety of the public. Decades of detailed wildfire research by the National Fire Protection Association, a nonprofit established in 1896, has shown that proper setbacks of shrubbery, removal of combustible material, and other house-proofing measures can significantly increase the likelihood that a house will survive a wildfire and wildfire risks will be mitigated. Wildfire management techniques, like clearing fire breaks and managing combustible fuel loads of dead or dry shrub vegetation, and the cutting of fire breaks are well-known, successful wildfire risk reduction techniques. In our rebuttal to Poynter's climate feedback, Friends of Science Society points out that in Alberta, in the 2011 statistics of human-caused fires versus those caused by lightning, reached 72% in the 5-year average. Human-caused wildfire includes arson, accidental or negligent activity, and fires started from human infrastructure issues like power lines sparking on contact with tree branches. Some of the largest Canadian wildfires, like the 2011 Slave Lake catastrophe, have been identified as caused by arson. For those people demanding climate action to reduce carbon dioxide from human industry, the grand irony is that poor forestry and fuel load management leads to wildfires, which in turn emit huge quantities of carbon dioxide, as reported by Esquire in this story. Proper forestry management would reduce those emissions. But as discussed in Friends of Science Society's report, Burning Questions, wildfires, especially those that create huge pyrocumulonimbus clouds, are a significant driver of climate change. The untold story of pyrocumulonimbus explains the complex findings of wildfire's influence on climate and environment, with research led by Mike Frum of U.S. Naval Research Lab. Many climate activists condemn Australia as being at fault for climate warming because it's a coal-producing nation. Well, based on these claims, Australia is facing economic trade wars by Greenpeace, Banktrack, and even Greta Thunberg. Green billionaires have pumped billions of dollars into local NGOs worldwide to force climate change policies on the public. The Climate Institute of Australia received almost $500,000 in 2011 from the Swiss-based Oak Foundation for a grant to develop public support and pass legislation on carbon pricing and to drive support for climate action in Australia and overseas. This funding includes millions for so-called climate justice movements and COP meetings, conflating politics, science, and grassroots rebels, all for the cause of green crony capitalists who want to cause a sea change in the world's economy through their global cap-and-trade plan. Friends of Science Society's report, Unfriend NGOs, Befriend Facts, deconstructs the green trade wars against essential prime power industries like coal, natural gas, and oil. These are driven by environmental groups acting as proxies for green billionaires who are deeply invested in pushing global cap and trade, carbon pricing, and their vested interests in renewables, all of which relies entirely on a climate catastrophe. Climate activists, Poynter and Facebook, are suppressing freedom of the press and freedom of speech while falsely proclaiming a climate emergency, a concept developed by a clinical psychologist intended to scare people into compliance. The same climate mobilization organization advocates for World War II-style rationing, managed economy, and massive restrictions on personal freedoms. So, on April 6, 2020, Friends of Science Society's 17th annual event, Freedom of Speech, No Climate Emergency, will host investigative journalist Donna Laframboise to address the diminishing personal freedoms in a climate-focused regime. And Dr. Roy Spencer will offer 10 reasons why there's no climate emergency. So, please join us. And for Friends of Science Society, I'm Michelle Sterling.